divorce lawyers of Reddit. What's the most outrageous reason someone filed for divorce? My aunt was dating an unemployed dude for a while. He was staying in her house rent-free. They got married and were getting ready to go on the honeymoon when the new husband tells her he's not going because he has to take care of his plants at the house. Big fight. Aunt goes on the honeymoon with her sisters instead. She comes home and tries to kick him out of her house. He refuses to leave. She tries to get the police involved. Dude is live streaming on Facebook how he is being trapped in his own home. Police tell my aunt there is basically nothing they can do. Can file for eviction after a divorce. Dude gets to live in her house with his precious plants for like 3 months until everything legally gets worked out. Paralegal. A couple got divorced over a cat. Wife called cat Snowball because of white fur and only wanted the cat to eat wet food or chicken breast. Husband called cat Lily again because of white fur and believed it should only eat dry food. These two argued for a year over custody of the cat but did not give a crap about their human kids aged 15 months, 4 years, and 6 years old. Not a lawyer, but I have been aching to tell this story for a while. So this girl I went to school with marries this rich guy from Ohio. She moves in with him and they seem to get along well. 6 months later she files for divorce. Up to that point, all I've heard from her was how good it was going. Anyways, it turns out our buddy had a fetish for urine. He asked her to urinate on him in the tub. At first she agrees to it as she thought it was a one-time thing, but he kept asking for it more and more. She tried to decline it respectfully but he wouldn't get any of the hints. She finally used the tub being too small as a reason. Next day she comes home with 24 construction guys and their heavy equipment tearing the bathroom walls. A week or so later, they finish up the bathroom. She comes home to a sign left on the fridge with a note to drink up. She got some watering to do. I don't know what exactly she put down as the official reason in the paperwork, but that was definitely her biggest reason to walk out of that relationship. Oh, I forgot to add, he also wanted to bring a horse to do the deed as well and at times asked her to make animal sounds while she stood on top of him. My aunt had a case where the wife had glued all of the outdoor hoses together so he wouldn't spend more time washing his vehicle anymore. When the glue didn't work she just cut them all up. When he bought new ones they filed for divorce. My 90-year-old client, the husband, and his son retained me to initiate divorce proceedings with his 88-year-old wife. They'd been married 60 years. The wife had recently taken to beating him with his own cane because their daughter poisoned her into thinking he was hiding money from them. The battle came down to husband and son versus wife and daughter. At their first court appearance, my client showed up in an old 1950s style pinstripe suit and fedora. He was a farmer his whole life, and this was clearly the only suit he owned. He was such a meek and lovely old gentleman. I had to pass my client on to a new lawyer midway through the proceedings because I accepted a job in a different country, but I understand the divorce was eventually granted. This one hurts. Imagine spending that much of your life with someone and then it breaks. 60 years is no joke. I would have been devastated. Colleague handled a case where money was not an issue but the kids were. Neither parent wanted them. My mom worked in abuse and neglect counseling and juvenile justice. There are a lot more cases like this than I'd care to admit. Parents divorce and neither side wants a kid. Some of them are that neither side wants one kid but will fight over another kid. It ends up totally screwing them over because they have to live with the fact that their parents didn't want them. I represented a P actress webcam model who filed for divorce from her husband who also did the P webcam model business. He would do gay P on the side because the pay was better. She was hesitant about it, but dealt with it because the pay was decent. Both sides had an agreement that it wasn't cheating as long as it was for work. One day she came home early and found her husband in bed with 2 men. They were not filming. That was too much for her. Needless to say, the old conservative judge couldn't wrap his head around this one. I'm imagining explaining the situation to my grandfather and I'm having a hard time because I think he would have a stroke before I finished explaining. When I clerked for a judge, we had a week-long divorce trial between a couple. The husband was a wildlife photographer and the wife was a stay-at-home wife. No kids, who helped remodel the home. Anyway, husband was mauled by a grizzly bear he was photographing, spent several months in the hospital and rehab and was served papers shortly after getting out. Now without an eye and with severe scarring on his face and side. She wanted half of everything. The non-scarred half at least. Not a divorce lawyer, but I had a friend whose parents divorced for irreconcilable differences over time spent playing EverQuest. In my game design class, it was referred to as EverCrack. My dad was a divorce lawyer. He had a client who wanted to divorce her husband for 2 reasons. 1. He did not have enough hair on his chest. 2. He did not drive fast enough. Keep in mind this was in the 70s when chest hair was a bit more important. Crap, yeah, it would have been embarrassing to show up late at a pool party and your man not having a decent chest bush. My grandfather's brother was a judge who presided over state issue marriages from time to time. One couple he married returned 6 months later to confirm the wedding and end their trial marriage. When he thusly informed them that there was no such thing and that they had been married for 6 months, they subsequently broke up. That sounds nutty, but if you believed your so when they told you trial marriages were a real thing, the betrayal could very easily end a marriage. I didn't like her anymore 2 days after being married. In sickness and in heath, till disinterest do you part. She was kidnapped in Mexico and he refused to pay ransom. Eventually her family managed to pay and she was left on the side of the road. It is not outrageous as in petty, but outrageous as how absurd that is. Honey, I love you, but we agreed to save up money so we can purchase a house. Your ransom would really set us back. I'm an intern, but the judge I work for used to do divorce work. He has some crazy stories, but this one is probably the most outrageous, though the divorce was pretty justified. Every morning this couple would sit in the bathroom together while one of them had their morning dump. One would sit on the toilet and the other on the rim of the bathtub. This particular morning the wife was on the toilet and husband on the edge of the tub. They started to argue about their relationship, so the wife reaches down, pulls her tampon out and flings it at husband. I'm told the tampon stuck for a brief second to his forehead before sliding off. He filed for divorce that same day or the next. At first I read this as one shoots in the toilet while the other shoots into the bathtub, as in they are both pooping simultaneously, and rock paper scissors for who gets to use the toilet. I was so concerned. I knew a guy from a high school job who divorced his wife of 2 months because she would sleep with a nightlight but he could only sleep in total darkness, as they apparently never lived together until after getting married. He hated her nightlight so much that he would often sleep on the couch instead, but sometimes he would claim the bed for himself and lock her out of the bedroom for the night. This was an eccentric late 40s man working at a Burger King who acted like all the other high school co-workers were his best chums, and often told us these weird stories. I'm glad I don't work with him anymore. Failed exorcisms. Client had an inner ear condition that caused chronic vertigo, but symptoms could be treated with medication. Husband was an evangelical who was convinced his wife 1. Had become possessed and that her vertigo and general crankiness with his methods were evidence of demonic possession. 2. The medication she was taking was enabling the devil to hide inside her. And 3. The only proper recourse was exorcism. He would hide her meds until she got dizzy and then try various methods of exorcism. This included sweating it out, put under blankets while incapacitated and locked in a room full of space heater, freezing it out, pretty much the reverse with AC, fans, and bags of ice, surprising it out. He would jump out and scare her like it was the hiccups, but instead of yelling boo he would recite the Lord's Prayer or Psalms. The final straw was that he tried to surprise it out of her by pushing her down the stairs when they were heading out for dinner. Note, this guy was some type of executive and they still went out to dinner after the stairs incident. She asked for the divorce at an Applebee's that night. I have often tried to picture that conversation, as she was adamant that he was a total sweetheart and never acted out of malice or anger. That one's just sad. My uncle has schizophrenia, and my grandaunt tried to convince my grandmother, his mom, to have an exorcist come instead of letting him stay on his medications. It's probably one of the reasons my grandmother stopped talking to them much. It pains me to think he could have gone through all of that if he'd been one of my grandaunt's son instead of my grandmother's. He had an argument with the new in-laws during the wedding and moved out at around 5 AM during the first night. I was a legal assistant when this case came in, but this lady divorced her husband of 2 months because he got her an iPad case for her birthday instead of the expensive jewelry she wanted. My client put his wife in an assisted living facility based on a misdiagnosis, the medication of which caused the wife to be unable to care for herself. While in the facility, my client shocker started dating another woman and methinks began using hard drugs. He used a lot of money on both of these things. She eventually got off the medication and got better. Suffice to say, she was not happy about what had transpired. Wasn't the reason, but did happen during the course of the divorce. Neither side would follow the court orders. When they had to go back to court, they were fighting over a pistol and the man's grandmother's bowls. I assumed for weeks that these bowls were some sort of heirloom or expensive china. When they finally brought the bowls in to swap, they were freaking Tupperware. My husband's first marriage lasted 6 months. He found out she had been sleeping around with several of his friends, and one of those friends finally felt so guilty that he fessed up. Husband actually wanted to work it out if he could, but when he tried to talk to her about it, she locked him out of the house and told him she wanted a divorce. "Why did you marry me?" he finally asked her. Her response? Because he was the only one she was sleeping with who could afford her dream wedding. Yup, B married him because she wanted a wedding and chose the person who could afford it. Mind you, he wasn't wealthy by any means. He just wishes his friend had felt guilty about, say, 6 months sooner. I had some friends get divorced because she legit hated Dale Earnhardt and he legit hated Jeff Gordon. My douche cousin told his wife she had 3 chances to give him a son. Daughter was born first, strike 1. Son was born second. Then they find out the boy can't eat gluten. So my cousin divorced her and has made 0 effort to see his kids. Who's your cousin? Henry Vidal. My great-great-grandparents had an interesting case. He was abusive, like pimp her out and then beat her for infidelity levels of abuse. This was the 1910s, though, and in our state you couldn't initiate a divorce for cruelty. In fact, the only possible grounds for divorce was infidelity. A few times, she tried just leaving him anyway. Once he came home from work and she, plus all 8 of their kids, were just gone. But he always found them, and since they were still married, he had every right to grab the kids and go back home with them. Finally, she moved out and went to live with another man. She flaunted the new guy around town until her no-good husband got embarrassed enough to sue her for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. Although she couldn't read or write, she put her ex on those papers the minute he served her. It was a major local scandal, very Catholic community. Divorce was rare, but she got what she needed to be safe. My client was the outrageous one, so my heart went out to his poor wife. He had OCD, which manifested primarily financially, so he made their lives a penny pinching heck. Examples: he was obsessed with avoiding unnecessary driving, wear and tear on the car, gas expenses, so he cut the whole family's hair at home and never let them eat at a restaurant or go to the movies. Weirdest of all, he kept 1 toilet paper roll on him at all times and you had to get 1 square from him before you could go to the bathroom. He never gave more than 1 square. Wife finally got fed up and left him when 1. He gave her bangs during an in-home haircut, and 2. Their daughter was so traumatized by the toilet paper thing they couldn't potty train her. Also, he hated paying his divorce lawyer bill. He was also an old-fashioned mega Catholic who considered divorce a deadly sin. He viewed my whole job as an unnecessary and sinful expense. Not me, but a friend. My mum has divorced her husband because his mother still coddled him at age 40, with his consent. They lived with his mother, common in Asia. By coddle I mean that she would walk straight into their room after his shower and powder his back for him. They couldn't lock their bedroom door because his mother would come in as and when she wanted. If they locked the door, she would knock repeatedly asking what they were doing. I worked as a paralegal for a divorce lawyer. Case analysis was one of my main responsibilities. I crap you not. A recently married couple of 2 years broke it off because the husband would not stop feeding the dog. The dog got outrageously fat. Apparently she saw connection between the dog and future children. I am a lawyer that handles quite a few divorces, among other things, and I've seen all sorts of reasons for marriages ending. The only thing that is consistently true is that it is never for just one reason, and it is never one-sided. When you hear about people divorcing over one stupid argument or mistake, usually that's just the straw that broke the camel's back. That said, some of the lighter straws I've seen include a guy who is 100% convinced that his wife, our client, is actually a lesbian in love with his sister and just using him as a cover. But he also claims she is hooking up with me to pay for her legal fees, and with every male whose phone number is in her call history. A woman who is divorcing my client because he was too sad after his father died last year. My client had to break down her door to get his father's ashes a few weeks after he left the house, and she refused to let him back in or give them to him. And a woman who claims my client was emotionally abusive towards her because he refused to yell at her and sat in silence ignoring her when she screamed at him. He has this recorded, time-stamped for the dates and times she insists the incidents occurred, and she's listened to them and his complete silence as she goes on tirades and insists this proves her point that he was emotionally distant and abusive. A friend of mine got married when she was 19 so she could drink at a bar. In Wisconsin you can drink underage with a parent or a spouse. Then when she turned 21 she got a divorce since she was legal to drink without him. Seems like an easy in and out transaction, but oh no. The biggest item they fought over was the garage beer refrigerator. Go figure. Not the most outrageous, but I had a client incur about 20 additional hours of billable hours because he and his ex-wife were battling and went to trial over their Star Wars collection. This was the only issue at trial. They were able to work out custody, child support, the house, but the Star Wars collection went to trial. The judge ended up splitting it in the most arse-hellish way possible, basically giving each side half of what they wanted and then mixing and matching everything else and breaking up collections. When speaking about it at a conference, the judge admitted she did it because if they were going to act like children, she would treat them like children. The thing is, the value of this collection was over $100K, so hardly kids stuff. Neither side had it in them to appeal, nor was the case law on either side given judicial discretion in property distribution. Worked in matrimonial law for a year and a half before I had to leave BC. It just overwhelmed me with how awful humanity is. I'll never forget filing papers that described her soon-to-be ex-husband's behavior, including master baits on the living room couch without closing the door and leaves sticky tissues everywhere, with further description of their 3 young children potentially walking in on him. I have a friend who used to work as a clerk for a family court judge. The minute a new job opened up working for a criminal court judge she jumped on it, because, as she put it, dealing with murderers all day is one heck of a lot easier than dealing with divorcing couples all day. I do my student practice at my family's law firm. Young woman filed for a divorce because her husband drank 1 beer during weekdays after a day of work. The guy wasn't violent, doing drugs, or anything like that. He was just a normal, polite guy who liked to have a cold one after a 10-hour shift. They are a very good couple and argue so rarely that this woman's friends told her to write down everything he did to upset her and reread it every day, so she had reasons to be angry. My mom, lawyer, set the woman straight, told her he just doing what all guys do and to find herself new friends instead of ones ready to sabotage their marriage. Not necessarily the most outrageous reason, but definitely some outrageous conduct. The saddest divorce we were hired to do, but ended up not doing for reasons that'll become apparent, was a woman in her 50s whose husband had really just let himself go. He was over 400 pounds, just did his 3rd triple bypass, refused to do anything different, just smoked and drank all day long while watching TV. His doctors told him he was going to die in 6 months if he didn't change his behavior. He told them they were all morons and could go to heck. Meanwhile, his wife is this successful woman who makes over $10K a month on her hobby, while making 6 figures in her normal work. She lost all respect for him, all desire, and all love for him by watching his decline. For the past few years, she can barely stand him. It also sounded like there was some verbal abuse going on where he constantly accused her of cheating and gaslighting her while cheating himself throughout their marriage, and spending all his money on coke. The usual. His accusations ramped up considerably once she lost about 200 pounds the good old-fashioned way. We were working on her divorce and one of her provisions was that he keep her as the beneficiary on his life insurance, for obvious reasons. She assured us he would agree to everything she suggested in the paperwork if she talked him through it. One day, we get an email from her saying to hold the divorce, not because they were reconciling, but because he refused to keep her as the beneficiary on his life insurance if they divorced. So, she stopped the divorce, so that she could get the benefits when he inevitably dies in a few months. He got drunk at the wedding. She did not like it, and decided to divorce him right after the honeymoon, which she went without him. Moreover, this was all an elaborate scheme of divorce robbery, because the guy was loaded, and so was his entire family. They were loaded because they were a family of excellent lawyers, and he was a third-generation lawyer, with all the smarts and experience of his predecessors combined. Let's just say it did not go well for her. I am not a lawyer, but I am a court clerk. The magistrate I used to work with got a petition for divorce and the reason the wife gave was he should have been more forthcoming about his shortcomings in the bedroom. Not a lawyer, but my uncle's wife left him because he was spending most of the time at the hospital with my dying grandfather instead of spending time with her. I work with a guy whose wife is currently peed because he hasn't been taking sufficient care of the lawn for the last few months. He works weird night shift hours full time. She's a teacher currently not working since it's summer. Oh, and his dad is terminally ill dying in a hospital bed right now, but she still has the audacity to be about the lawn not getting mowed. Was a loud chewer at the dinner table. He developed a complex and literally needed out as he couldn't bear to eat with her. This sounds like a Seinfeld B-plot. Now, but my father's best friend divorced his wife over her cooking. Apparently, every day he would come home to amazing cooked meals. However, she couldn't cook at all and was ordering food from different restaurants. She even went as far as dirtying pots and pans to make it look like she cooked all day. She got away with this for almost a year before he caught on. This was back in the day before you could check your bank statements online, and since she did all the billing, he didn't notice how much money was missing that she was spending on takeout. Not a divorce lawyer, but got out of my first marriage because shortly after we got married he decided he didn't like the way I talked, and asked me not to talk when we were out in company unless I could talk straight. I'm not a lawyer, but I was once buying a computer from someone on Craigslist, and when I got to his house it was full of computers everywhere. There were monitors laying on the floor and half-built computers laying around. Full-built computers all over the place. And I'm talking expensive gaming computers, not your everyday all-in-one computers. We got to talking about why he had so many, and the guy said he was just obsessed with them, and he confessed that the reason his wife divorced him was because she said I was too obsessed with my computers. I'm not a lawyer, but I was once buying a computer from someone on Craigslist. Good enough for me. The dog he bought me peed on the carpet. To be fair, it really tied the room together. Taught the parakeet certain cuss words for his wife. The parrot lives with the man now. I thought about going towards family law, and then I realized I'm gonna have to deal with things such as who's gonna get the parrot and grandma's vase. Nope. Divorce lawyer in London. Had a client who indulged in some recreational drug use. His dealer lives in the same apartment building as him. Went down one day to pick up some of that sweet coke. When drug dealer, female, came to the door he could hear his wife in the background. Turns out that his wife also liked the high life and was getting her fix in with the neighborhood dealer. But it doesn't end there, because they all get on so well they start having parties and hanging out. Parties become drug-fueled orgies, and hey presto, each week the husband and wife put their kids to bed and head downstairs to the dealer's flat for a feast of drugs and flesh. A couple of months go by and the wife comes home and says she is leaving him to be in a full-time same-sex relationship with the dealer. Dude is now stressed AF, but he can't score no more from his dealer who stole his missus. Just a reminder, nobody in this story is as attractive as what you are thinking. It's not a ridiculous reason, it's a ridiculous scenario. Happened to a friend. Girlfriend wanted a cat even though it was against rules in that building. My friend caved and they got one. Then she brought another one home without asking what he thought about it. Didn't get that one fixed. It had 2 different litters. When it was all said and done, they had 12 cats in a 2-bedroom house, and she didn't think it was a problem even though it drove him out of his mind. Now, but the story of the couple in Algeria always gets me. Groom sees his new wife the morning after the wedding without makeup, takes her for an intruder, and proceeds to sue for over $10K for psychological trauma. Smelly feet. Though there's no divorce in my country, only annulment, my client can't stand the smell of his wife's feet. Lucky for him, because incompatibility clause includes smelly feet. I was smelling the whole process and the judge laughed, examining the evidence of his wife having a smelly feet. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.